Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I am your host, Steve Harper, and with me today, I am super thrilled to have a good friend, longtime Rippler, Sonya Stattmann, with me in the house today. I'm so excited. We're recording this not only for the podcast, but also for my YouTube channel, so the video will be out there soon. But this is Sonya. Welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast, first of all.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, as always, to connect with you, Steve. And, we've had such an amazing, connection in the past. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm very lucky to call you a friend and a longtime Rippler because you have been so instrumental. But before I get into that, I actually have to let our listeners know and the audience know that this is actually our second time of doing this. I mean, so I think we recorded earlier this week and we ran into some technical difficulties, which were not discovered until post session. Yeah. And so I feel like we already had this great conversation and we're just going to build on that. So it was, but I'm so grateful that you can make time this afternoon to join me for another run at this recording.
I love it. I mean, having a podcast, you have those moments where things hit the technical difficulties and you've got to kind of restart and roll with it. And I feel like we're always good with rolling with things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, like my good friend Asha Prasad tells me, she's like, it's not, they're not mistakes. They're just, happy accidents. Right. So, who knows? We probably left so much good stuff out of that last recording or what we thought was recording that we'll capture today. So let's just roll with it. I'm glad and appreciative of the fact that you could be here today for sure. So, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I had shared previously what an instrumental person you were for me right as our, kind of this ripple was kind of taking shape. You and I met and connected. As you reminded me, we had connected at one of my first Ripple events, and that was the first time you and I got to know each other. You were fairly new to Austin at that time, and we had this great interaction and spent some time getting to know one another. And you were really curious at the time about what this was all about and ultimately what I wanted to do with the Ripple. And you were so key in helping me refine my message, figuring out how to brand it, personalize it in a way that felt really congruent to who I was and what I was about. And so, as you can tell on the website and other literature that we've got out there, that branding is still there and still very much alive. And it makes me smile every time I see it. So I really owe you a big debt of gratitude for your friendship and support, not only at that point in my life, but really just all these years.
Look, I feel exactly the same way. I mean, I was, it's so interesting because I was very new to Austin. I was a single mom at the time. Yep. Navigating my business as well. And I didn't really know anyone here. I just moved to Austin with this idea of like, this is the city I want to be in. I have no idea what I'm going to do or how I'm going to grow or who I'm going to meet. And I remember sitting there in that session with you and you sat down with me, like here you are, the host of an event, right? And we did it at the Alamo Draft House movie theater. And you sat down with me and really took the time to get to know me and really take the time to, understand what I need and who I was. And it was just so much the way that I believe relationships should be. And we were so connected from the very beginning. And it changed everything for me. Like I remember you immediately started introducing me to people. And before you know it, I had all these ripples going on. And that led to so much of me building my business, my second business, which was the Soma Vita, which was a wellness center and co-working space in Austin. All of that was developed by those initial ripples I had with you. That's how amazing it is.
Well, I appreciate that. It was my pleasure, and I got to be honest with you, it was really one of those cool serendipitous moments when we connected because you're like, hey, look, I don't do a lot of these networking things. They're not fun. They're not. You and I gelled at that level because most of those events were just not, not our cup of tea, right? We were really better at not necessarily about the elevator pitch or those quick exchange of business cards and kind of evaluation about whether we were suitable for one another as a prospect. We were more about conversation, engagement, and connecting. And so when I found out that you were fairly new to Austin and I know at the time that you were working towards that second business, but you had this great, kind of marketing flair and expertise that you and I think one of your friends at the time, Marcy Finney, were trying to put together to create some co-collaboration and work on clients. And I just knew, not only for my own personal benefit, that you could help me, but just your approach in how you were going about educating people about their marketing message, being true and authentic to who they were, and how that had to be essential to their business. It really impressed me at that time, because it was certainly something I needed to hear, but what I found for most of my clients I was working with, they needed to hear it as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, I mean, now I'm full-time into coaching, but at that point I was doing a lot of sort of marketing. Branding was actually my first business. And I think why I was so good in that industry is because I could pull out people's essential self, right? Like, I could see and feel who they were and how to create their brand and marketing to be very congruent. And now I do that work in a totally different way, because I help women really feel the congruency in themselves. So I don't do their marketing and branding anymore, but I help them really kind of unfold that congruency in themselves so that they can do their marketing and branding in a way that feels aligned with them. But I think that's this, I always felt like this was the missing piece in that industry, is that authenticity comes from the congruency. And you've got so many people who are always out there trying to make themselves something rather than just being who they actually are. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why you were so easy to work with too, because you were genuine. You were just this is who you are. And it was so easy to kind of pull that out and create a brand from it.
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, it was a fun experience, because I think actually, and I don't even know if I told you this story the other day, but at the time I had a few people that were advising me, and everything was geared around, the corporate aspect, the application of the tool set. And of course, as you know, the book that I had written was really geared around people that really wanted to build connections in a more authentic way. So I think that's how we aligned relative to that. But the advice I was being given at the time, and me being a first-time author, and certainly not someone that was super comfortable about getting up in front of a group of individuals to share the concept. I wasn't a well-polished professional speaker by any stretch of the imagination, but what I recognized, that I had these people that were kind of forcing me down one path, and I realized that, it wasn't feeling right, but I didn't have any other experience to benchmark off of, right? And as an entrepreneur and business owner, certainly knew the value of driving towards more of a corporate oriented message, but there was something lacking. And so you and I got together after that 8-minute Ripple event. We got together at the coffee shop. I still remember the day, and we ended up having this just amazing brainstorming session. And really, at the end of the day, you were really kind of helping me find my true voice at that point, my confidence about what the Ripple could be, and what it could mean. And it didn't have to fit into a pre-described box or a direction or a path. You were really helping tease that out. And of course, as I verbalized it, everything started to make sense. But I think that's part of your genius, is that you don't give people the answers. You just help give them the space to find the answers. And you may tease out a few things along the way that helps them look at things from a different perspective, which is why you're such an amazing coach. And at the time, you were certainly an amazing brand builder in that regard. And so it was a very fun and unique experience for me, and certainly memorable. And that was, 15 years ago, right? At this point.
Yeah. And I think, what's so interesting and what's testament to this whole process is that when we're more authentic to ourselves, when our brands and our businesses are aligned with who we are, right? It doesn't go out of style. Right. And this is why many of the brands that I helped build, decades ago are still going forward with their branding. And it's because we were able to pull out such a core piece of themselves that doesn't change. Our innate soul, our self, how our essential self, however you kind of want to look at it, like that part of us doesn't shift and change a lot. Like we evolve in personality, we evolve in a lot of other ways. But that core self, if we can convey that through our brands in our businesses, then, that lasts forever, which is totally amazing.
Well, and another ringing endorsement for you. At the same time you were working with me for the Ripple, I was also CEO of a technology company that was in the email security space. And I connected you with the founder of that company. And I think you were really essential in helping that rebranding process. But the thing that impressed me the most, and I shared this the other day, was that you didn't come in and say, okay, tell me about your product or your service or what value you provide to the client. What you really did was you were good about helping us figure out why we were passionate about what we were doing at the time, which, having gone through that process with you through the Ripple, I just smiled the whole time, because that founder didn't really understand that, didn't really necessarily, I don't think at the time, appreciate it for what it was. But I think at the end of the day, we ended up delivering this whole branding kit approach to the business, where we really, really took substantial steps forward in terms of aligning with where we needed to be as an organization, what we were trying to accomplish, not just the products we were trying to sell, which I think actually helped accelerate our success. And so you're really good and talented at that. And obviously, and I want to get into what you're doing today more so, because I know you're focused now and shifting, not just with individual coaching, but you're really committed to the leadership phase. But I almost feel like we need to kind of go back to the origin story, right? Aside from you and I kind of connecting and engaging, you've taken some major risks and direction changes with your business and your career, and every one of them, you're super successful on so many levels. It's not even funny. And I'm just honored to be in your orbit, quite honestly, because you are such a rock star. But you come to Austin, you create this life, you have this great effective business that was going forward. You started founded Soma Vita, which was a wellness and co-working space. It was an amazing spot for us actually to hold Ripples at for a lot of years. But then you kind of like took this gamble and you're like, hey, guess what? I'm out of here. I'm going to go to Australia of all places. I'm not just going to go to Dallas or Houston or New York. I'm going to go to Australia. Right. So Tell us a little bit of that origin story and what kind of motivated that change.
Oh my gosh. And it's so funny because I can actually start the origin story and for that change with a Ripple, right? And so it was so interesting because I remember it was toward the end of the year. I came to a Ripple event at Soma Vita, and you had us draw what we wanted to create. What was our vision? What do we want to manifest over the next year? And you were going to seal up those pieces of paper and drawings that we did, and then you were going to deliver back to us in a year later. And so I remember at the time, I wasn't dating anyone. I, was running this business, but I ended up drawing an airplane with me and my daughter flying, and that I was going to meet my husband. I even had Australia on there. And that I was going to be my partner. We were going to have a family. And I had all these really interesting things written, drawn out like cartoons. I'm a terrible drawer as well. And you sealed it up.
You're a really good drawer. I remember.
No, terrible, like a kid drawing. And you sealed it up. And then and so I had no idea where my life was going, right? Here I am just, still doing my thing, running two businesses, single mom. And all of a sudden over the next year, all these things started to unfold. My business started to shift. I met my husband, and then he happened to be in Australia. We have the classic eHarmony's love story. And I all of a sudden towards the end of the year, when I received that piece of paper again, I had manifested every single thing on it. It was fascinating. And I totally forgot about it. And so, I met my husband on eHarmony. He was in Australia. I was here in Austin. We fell in love very quickly. We just knew we were destined to be together. And he had a daughter in Australia. And so it wasn't really possible for him to move to America to be with me. But I had full custody of my daughter. So it was completely possible for me to move to Australia to be with him. And he asked me to marry him a few months after we met. And I pretty much picked up my life and moved to Australia, business and all, right? And I think it was a huge risk. It was, and I am definitely a risk taker. but I was up for the challenge, and I got to, move to Australia. We lived there for about eight years. We had another child. I ran my business from Australia as well. And, at that time, I kind of do what I do, which I did here as well, is I build ripples, right? So I went to Australia. I went to some co-working spaces. I started making connections. I built my business back up from scratch, especially at that time when, it was kind of this was 10 years ago. So it wasn't as, you couldn't just be on Facebook. It was a totally different world. And so I built it up from scratch like I always have. And then now, I've grown to be quite international. So I've got clients from all over the world, and it's been amazing. And in 2018, my goal was really to retire my husband from corporate. So I built my business up so that I could retire him from his longtime corporate job. And then we were free. And I think in 2018, we decided, since we were free, why stay in one location? So we spent all 2019 traveling nomadically as a family, which was, interesting and amazing. I've talked about this a lot on my podcast. And so, I think it's been great. And then we decided right at the beginning of 2020 to settle down, which I'm so glad we did back in Austin, because then, of course, COVID hit, and I'm really glad to not be traveling during this time.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the States. Whoa.
I know, right? So it's been such an interesting journey. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was an amazing experience. And, I have an interesting, story to tell about it as well.
Well, what's amazing about it, and I'm going to put your website up just so for those that are watching the video and those that are listening to this on the podcast. Sonya's website is Sonya Stattmann. That's STATTMANN.com. I just put up a screenshot of your website and the podcast that you're in. The amazing thing for me that when I look and listen to that story and sort of how you come full circle, I mean, you didn't really give yourself full credit. I mean, you took like a giant leap of faith, right? And you're going to Australia, completely different environment. You had no network to speak of. You obviously had your future husband, but other than that, you really had to create this new identity and this new development. Obviously, you had some clients that had gone with you relative to the programs that you were doing, and that's fantastic. Your stuff is amazing, and no doubt they would be with you wherever you were in the world. But for a large part of that early time, I remember you and I talking, you were just out creating just unbelievable connections almost from day one, because you were so enthusiastic, which is pretty unusual, right? For somebody to take that leap of faith, go to a completely different country. Sometimes they're not super supportive of, here this American girl's coming in with her ideas and business philosophies. And there was some pushback, I'm sure, at some juncture when people were like, well, it might work there, but it doesn't work here. And you just kept pushing through and just breaking those barriers. And, when I talked to you, gosh, I think 6 or 9 months after you had moved there, you were like, I am living my best life. I'm like having the time of my life. I'm engaged and connected to so many new opportunities. And I'm so grateful that I took this chance.
Yeah, look, it was amazing. And, it was difficult too. It is a different country. I think as we start to explore traveling, there's a lot more people who are thinking about traveling nomadically and thinking about other countries. And, it's definitely a fully new culture. And even Australia, which is very westernized, speaks English, in a lot of ways, very different culture. And I remember when I got there at first, I didn't understand, the connection was different, right? The ability to build relationships was very different. And so I did have to learn how to sort of navigate different energy, different culture, different kind of reality. But I guess I'm really good at reading people, right? And relating to people. So, I listen, I observe, I watch, I connect, I try things and see how people respond. And so over time, I was really able to, find my footing there in a really great way.
Well, and you were still connected back here because I know with your former partner with Somavita, right? Laura Shook
Guzman now.
Guzman, I forget she got married. It's like you. I always want to call you Sonya Davis, and it's just not right. But you guys connected and started the podcast, Women in the Business Arena. And I remember some of those early episodes, like you were talking about some of the, the differences between what you'd known in the American business culture versus there, and how despite those geographic differences, the same issues, especially for women, were the same, right? A lot of them had to get more comfortable in cultivating and crafting the direction that they wanted to go with their lives, but also their careers. And your messaging, especially around the podcast, but of course, all the programs, has been about empowerment, authentically helping that individual figure out what their path should be. And I'm super thrilled to see that you're focused now on leaders, because I think, it all starts from the top down in most cases, right? In the leadership, especially women entrepreneurs, you're giving them permission to be able to ease into this way that they want to run their business, the way they want to be out there in the world, and embrace things that, you don't generally find in a masculine culture, right? And so maybe talk to us a little bit about that and how you've gotten sort of inspired in that space.
Yeah, look, I've always loved talking about the difference between masculine and feminine. I've always, even like years ago before I left to go to Australia, my business was called The Feminine Way, right? Like I always wanted to support women to find a different way to lead, right? A different way to be themselves, a different way to hold career and family in a way that's aligned with who they are, that's easier, that avoids burnout. And so, I've just kind of dug deeper and deeper and deeper into that topic. And over the years, like now I've been, coaching basically for 20 years. Like I've worked with so many people. And so there is a lot of common denominators across countries. For women, like things that we are trying to navigate that is not effective. Like we operate in a different world. Like yesterday, even I did a podcast on this where we were talking about cycles, like women and men as well, but women especially. We are constantly pulled by cycles, whether that's like childbirthing and being a mom and our kids growing up, and then being in menopause, or whether that's like our menstrual cycle. There's all these things that are really interesting, but we are very cyclical creatures as women. But business in the traditional way doesn't allow for cycles, right? It's just like you got to be on, you got to go. But like we have to learn to cultivate our businesses and our careers in a way that allows for that cyclical process, because we're so much more superpowers when we are allowed to like go in and out and have that cyclical process. So there's just all these ways I've really learned that women can specifically step into, more of their power and more of their potential if they operate in a very different way than we're taught. And so that is in the leadership position in corporate, or that is in politics, or that is in business. We have got to actually completely do things in a different way in order to succeed.
Absolutely. For my listeners and for those that'll watch this video, Sonya has such an amazing approach in there's a number of great programs. We'll put her website up at the end and also in the show notes. But the thing that you said that I think just really, really resonates with me, because I work with a lot of females, that I'm fortunate enough to coach or work with in their businesses. The permission thing, I think, is the key, because like you said, they've sort of been, cultured to go one direction, and a lot of them don't recognize the importance of giving themselves permission to figure out and how to choose that path. And left to your own devices, you may default back to what you think society wants you to do. And especially for a woman leader, I think it's important for you to get comfortable making those hard decisions and not necessarily looking at, your outcomes or your successes or failures based on everybody else's perspective, but really recognizing and owning your power in that process. And so I think that's a really unique perspective. But, how many amazing business professionals that that are women are allowing themselves to have other people dictate their path. And how, I know for you, it's a passion for you to help get them and shake that out of them and say, look, there's more to this. There's more to, like you said, I mean, there's the components of, and both men and women have it, right? Feminine and masculine energy. And there's a time and a place for that. But for the most part, I think one of the things that I think is so critical is that you do and you teach your people is you have to get clear and very specific about what you want that outcome to be. Because if you default to everybody else, you're going to end up living and working in a life that you will end up eventually probably not liking too much.
100%. And the thing is, what's so interesting and subtle and psychological is that women are trained from birth to serve others, right? We're trained from birth to give up our desires for the good of others, for the good of our partners, for the good of our parents, for the good of our children. Like in all of these ways, we are literally taught in subtle ways all across the board that we put ourselves last, we put our self-care last, we put our growth last, we put what we need last. And so, it's like, it's so deeply embedded. And that's what's so interesting, that over the last few decades of working with women, that is the core of everything, is this idea that we cannot own anything for ourselves. We cannot have self-ownership because we are so tied in to all of our relationships. And that's a real game changer when you step back and you look at, but what do I want? Because when I ask a lot of my clients, what do you want? They throw out stuff. And I'm like, as we dig deeper, as I unravel all those threads, as I pull those threads, right, we find that really they have no clue what they want. Right. They've done what they think they should want, what someone else told them to want, what their dad wanted for them. Right. There's all this deep psychological stuff. But rarely, in my experience, have I found anyone who has really sat down and contemplated, for women, what they want. Forget everyone else. Forget their partner, their kids. What do they desire? And when they got that, when they really get what that is, that changes everything in what they create.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that is so essential about what you're doing today, specifically focused on leaders, is when those leaders can step into that power and they can define their own path, they are actually setting the example for everyone that may be working with them or collaborating with them. They're blazing the trail for everyone else to recognize them, especially for women-owned businesses. I think that's super empowering for women that are looking up to that leader to say, you're someone that I want to hold, I want to hold myself up to those same standards. I want to learn from those lessons. And you said something that I think was really powerful, is that because women are sort of positioned in that serve mentality, I tell my clients all the time, the first person you should be serving is yourself, right? Not necessarily in a negative way per se, or to be totally selfless or selfish, but in a selfless way that says, hey, look, I have something of value to give, but if I don't value it myself and here first, I can't possibly expect the world out there to value it either. And so I think with you and what you're doing with these programs and the different approaches on your coaching and this, we're going to talk about an upcoming program you've got coming up here in at the end of this month. But these are the types of things that I think so many women need to be aware of, and men as well, because the lessons you teach, they cross those boundaries and they're so important and powerful.
Yes. And I think, it's interesting because I think my podcast, my programs, they really speak to people who feel like they're not served by what is considered normal, right? So men who are a bit more feminine, not like in an effeminate way, but like they just don't function in that same way, or men who feel like they've struggled to fit into the corporate environment because they don't want to push, they want self-care, they want to take care of themselves, they want to balance. That's people who've really felt aligned and resonated with a lot of my work. And it's interesting because when you were talking about selfishness, one of the things I talk a lot about is responsible selfishness. We need to learn to have responsible selfishness. And the truth is, when we're taking care of ourselves and we allow other people to take care of themselves, with exception to our children, which we are, we have an ownership of in some ways, at least when they're young. Other than that, everyone should be responsibly selfish for themselves. And when we do that, we're empowering ourselves and we're empowering others. And that's where I think it gets really interesting and messy. I mean, I end up doing a lot of relationship teaching in my program, because I've got a program that's one-on-one, but it also has a group component. And it's interesting because everybody longs for more relationship teaching. Like, this is where things get messy, right? Like, how do I empower myself without disempowering someone else? Or how do I empower someone else without disempowering myself? And so it's this really interesting process of recognizing that really we're empowering others when we empower ourselves, right?
Yep,
like
absolutely.
it's this. And when we try to control others, or we try to please them, or we try to do what they want, we're actually disempowering them. So it's a whole different way to think about things. And it starts absolutely with us being responsibly selfish and empowering ourselves first. And that's what I really talked about. I did a TEDx talk when I was in Australia. And, that was really the whole core of that TEDx talk, was that we talk about empowerment all the time. We think about empowering others all the time. But if we don't empower ourselves first, there is no empowering others.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I also think that power, recognizing that power, has other benefits as well. Like you said, you'd end up doing a lot of work with people in relationships, because a lot of times when you finally come into that power and you recognize what you will tolerate, what you won't tolerate, really makes you start to reevaluate everything that you have in your life, the people that you hang out with, the friends, the family, potential romantic relationships. Things start to fall into alignment. And sometimes, as I've told my clients before, sometimes relationships are there just to be there for that moment in time, and it's okay to let them go. But the ones that don't serve you any longer, you need to help kind of, accelerate their exit, because anybody, you and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, there are a lot of people that like to have that sort of that lobster or crab mindset, where they don't like to see anybody else try and crawl out of the box ahead of them. Yep. You should be down here with us. You should, just accept what you have. And it's just such total, nonsense, right? For a variety of reasons. But a lot of times when you come into that understanding of, no, there is more to this life, there is more to this career, there is more that I can, as a person, man or woman, find and recognize and realize for my life going forward. Sometimes you have to make those hard decisions about who to bring with you and who to leave behind.
Oh, yes. And I think that creates a lot of pain and suffering. Like, a lot of people struggle with that. But, it also, what you were talking, it also reminded me of why what you do is so important. I think also, like, what I'm cultivating in my group programs is really important. Like, we need people to surround us that are holding us up, that are lifting us up, that are, pulling us up versus pulling us down. Because I think it is absolutely true. As you start to grow, as you start to create success, as you start to build wealth, what ends up happening is the crabs in the bucket. And so what I've always loved about you, Steve, is that you cultivate these groups of powerful people, right? Of amazing people, not traditional sense powerful, but like truly empowered, lovely beings, right? And every group I've ever gone to that you've cultivated and curated is exactly like that. And so it's so funny because I hear everyone say this. The other day I had a meeting with someone you connected me with. And both of us said, anyone Steve connects us with, we always make time for. We always make time for. And like, that is what you do that's so beautifully. And same with me. I work to curate these groups because we need people who are more aligned with where we're going than where we've come from. And I think sometimes that's really hard. We don't know where to look or where to go, but that's where you start to find these kind of relationship building processes like Steve, and some of the things I do. And there's lots of people out there building beautiful communities too.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I don't think what I do is all that special. What you do is amazing. I'm just lucky to have like people like you in my life that I can connect to other cool people that I have in my life. But you are right. I mean, the nice thing about the fact that we get to kind of do what we do is we especially from that perspective of coach or advisor or consultant, depending on what we're engaged with relative to our clients. The neat thing about that is being able to help kind of take these messy puzzle pieces and kind of fit them together and put people, into situations and through introductions and environments that we see can make absolute sense to them, but they may not see it necessarily or may not go out of their way to make those things happen. But when they do, it's like this light bulb goes off. It's like the most rewarding experience ever because you get you get this, just at least for me, for sure, I get this like adrenaline hit when I know that I've made that great connection, not because I'm looking for the credit, not because there's, any kind of financial value for me in doing it, but it's because I recognize one really cool person needs to know this other really cool person. And it's just this amazing dopamine hit when you actually see that, yep, what you thought and what you assumed and had at your gut level actually came to fruition. It's pretty powerful.
Oh, yes. And you need to also give yourself huge amounts of credit, because the ripples you create. I mean, I can think of every single person you've introduced me to in the last, 16 years. Every single person has led somewhere, right? Like has created, and I didn't ever know it was going to happen or how it was going to unfold, but every single person has led me to something very pivotal in my life, an amazing ripple, an amazing connection. And like, I don't know if you really recognize how special you are and what you bring to the table. Like, because we are so enriched by those connections. Like, you are like a super matchmaker. That's your calling.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Gosh, I think we should just end this interview right here. No, I really appreciate that. I'm passionate about it, and I'm passionate about helping good people like yourself meet other good people, and there are certain things I think in your world that you just know you're destined for. And I know coaching is like that for you. Empowering women is like that for you. And connecting people is the same for me. And it's just one of those things that is, I get the biggest kick out of seeing those things happen. And because especially today, I think, and you and I have talked about this offline before, about this environment that we're now in, both operating in as business owners and really just as professionals, is changing so rapidly with people and the social networks and the approaches that they have. And we're in a time period where connecting is easier than it ever has been in the history of mankind. And yet here we are with less satisfaction in our relationships. We don't have the right kinds of connections. Almost all of the relationships or connections that people tend to have tend to be surface at best. And so I think it's so essential for the work that you're doing, and I hope to do, obviously, is help people say, look, the way that this is doesn't mean that has to be the way it is, right? And there is a better way, and there's something really valuable about embracing this approach to really having that authentic connection so that you can build authentic relationships.
100%. And the authentic connection starts with yourself, right? Like, that is a piece that a lot of people are missing, is that they try to be something else, or they don't honor and appreciate exactly who they are. I've been doing a lot of work this last month on strengths, right? Like understanding my strengths. I took a strengths test, like the Clifton strengths test, which is a very common strengths test. And I've been looking at my whole world and my whole business through my strengths, right? Like, and it's so interesting when you do that, because oftentimes what happens is we're actually looking at our weaknesses. We're trying to fix our weaknesses instead of just fully stepping into our strengths. So one of the things, like my actual lowest strength, so like my greatest weakness, is consistency, which is so interesting. It's like, it was such a light bulb at how my entire life I have tried to be consistent. Like, my entire life has been this fight to be consistent. But the truth is, I can't be that way. I'm a cyclical person. I have to go inward, and then I have these outward creations that are really powerful, and then I have to go inward again. I can't be consistent. So I need a team that can be consistent, right? Because that helps me in terms of my business. But appreciating myself and learning to be my authentic, inconsistent, and amazing self has been such a wake-up call, right? Has been such an understanding that we really have to appreciate who we truly are, not try to be something else, but like really step into the power of who we are. And that changes everything. And when we're authentically connected to ourselves, we are naturally authentically connected to everyone else.
Absolutely. And, a point that I really want to point out to our listeners and those that are going to see this video is that something you just said about going inward and still doing the work. People look at us as, experts in our spaces, right? But we never are satisfied with just getting to a certain point. To be good and great at what you do, you have to constantly be evolving and constantly learning. And so the fact that you dove back in and say, hey, look, let me try this strengths, evaluation out and kind of see where I fit and where I'm not. And let me recognize what I'm good at and what I need to improve upon, or what I potentially never going to be good at it. So I need to outsource it or find other means of delivering. And that's what I think a lot of folks that listen to this podcast, you never stop just because you got to a certain age or because you got a certain degree level or you got to that certain job. To continue to be great and to evolve as a human being means you constantly continue to put in the work, which means you never stop learning, you never stop exploring, you never stop trying. And I think that's so awesome that you got to that point and kind of recognize that and like, all right, and I'm going back and myself just over the last month or two, been reading a lot of autobiographies and really honing in on some specific things about leadership, because not only do I want to be a more effective leader for the 3 companies I run, but I also want to be able to take some of those leadership lessons that were tried and true 20 years ago, 50 years ago, hundreds of years ago, and be able to apply those into today's world because it's so necessary and so needed and people are looking for it. So it's interesting that you and I are going along similar paths, different, but similar, because we always want to bring the best parts of ourselves to our clients and to the world.
Yes. And I think true experts are the ones who never claim to have it all, right? It's kind of like I talk about thought leadership. And, when I talk about thought leadership is not something you decide you want to do, right? It's something that you've been doing for a long time. You've never claimed it and someone else claims it for you, right? Yeah. Like that's thought leadership. And I think same with experts, right? To be a true expert, you're always honing your craft. You're always digging in. You're never mastering. You never got it. So anyone, in my opinion, who starts to say, I've got the one answer, that's it, I am the expert, like I'm instantly turned off, because what I want to see is someone humble enough to say, look, I do have some really great wisdom and I'm always learning. I'm always growing. Sometimes my wisdom will evolve, and what I thought 10 years ago will not even be close to what I thought now. That's real. That's true. And it's just a whole different way to sort of look at this process and understand that the people you should trust are the ones who, really put in the miles as well. Like, I often think that, right now what the world needs is those of us who've been decades in our industries, right? It is because we bring time-tested and proven things. Like the stuff that I teach my clients about business, so much of it is, a lot of it is psychological and mindset and leadership, right? But the other part of structures, they're actually traditional. Like I had a branding business. I was in traditional business 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so like these really important things like building relationships, learning to do sales, right? These are such classic things that never change. But you have all these people who are trying to sell these tactics and these quick fixes. And the people that I end up finding and working with, they don't even know the basics. They don't know the foundational things that they need to know. And I love that, because I feel like we're the experts, right? The long time people in these industries, the ancient ones, we're bringing forth this information that is so practical and so, important and so foundational that's how people succeed. They succeed because they've got the foundation.
That's right. Absolutely. I mean, very well said. And, I see a lot of the same things that you were talking about, where you've got people that are, I'm a business expert, or let me help you define your lead magnet, or let me help you get into podcasting. I've got this program, that's going to help make you $10 million in a year's time, or whatever it is. And it's like, you start to kind of peel back that onion and you realize, hey, they haven't done anything relative to their career. It's the people, no offense to anyone else, but I mean, like you and I that have been through that University of Hard Knocks, and we've been able to come out, with a few bruises and, kind of a few knocks along the way, but we're able to take those experiences and we're able to help leverage that in a way that actually helps our clients maybe not run through some of the same more painful lessons that we've learned, which I think is key. And so I had heard one time, anybody that claims to be an expert, you always have to look at them with a little bit of side eye, right? Mm-hmm. Because I heard early on in my career, you never have to tell somebody you're an expert. They'll know by your actions, by how you're performing, and by not necessarily putting, your ego out there for people to give you that title. You're gonna do it just through your actions and what you're actually accomplishing, because you don't worry about those things. You're out too busy working to make it so.
Yeah, 100%. I love it.
Well, so switching gears just really quickly, because we need to wrap this up a little bit, but a couple of things for our listeners. There's a little bit of an audio problem. I've got to tell you that we're Sonya and I are both in Austin today recording at a physically safe distance, and so she's at her place, I'm at my office, and we are actually going through this big, huge up and down turn with the internet these next couple of days as kids are going back to school here, but they're going online. So, I apologize. We've had a little bit of audio fluctuation, but this is just such great content. Please stay with us, because you definitely don't want to miss a second here of Sonya's great advice and guidance. Along that lines, you have something pretty major coming up towards the end of the month, right? I really was fascinated when you said this. It's a virtual kind of day that you're putting on, right? It's a virtual retreat that anybody can do from anywhere. And can you tell us about it? I'm going to put the website up, but it's reclaim2020event.com.
That's right.
But tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to be really in the atmosphere of the now, right? So I'm always out there talking to people, connecting, being in community. And what I started to see in a lot of my circles is a lot of people who are kind of ready to write off 2020. All the goals they had in January, of course, have drastically changed, because of COVID and then racism and then all the many, many things we're dealing with. And so, we've had to reevaluate, but instead of kind of people putting their attention on what they want to create from where they are now, there's kind of a lot of lack of motivation and struggle to determine what you want and lack of clarity. And I kept hearing people say, I'm just going to write off this year. I'm going to write off this year. And inside I was dying. So I was like, no, right? There's so much we can create the rest of this year. Exactly. September, October, November, December. There's 4 months left of 2020. And so
That's right.
It inspired me to kind of create something that would help people reclaim this year and really create their desire, get clear about what they want, and learn how to create in a different way. So I'm a real big about, kind of creating in a different way with the most return on effort possible, with minimal stress, with really just aligning with what we want and using these powers we have to create. And so I'm going to be sort of teaching throughout the day these methods. It's going to have breakouts. We start the day with a yoga class. And so it's pretty awesome. But I also crafted this event because I've got clients all across the world who can't attend in their time zone, right? Unless they want to stay up all night. I've also created this amazing pre-event program. And at the end of it, I'll have a whole post replay mini course so that people can, if they can't access the whole live event, they can actually go through the whole process on their own. So it's pretty exciting. And, I love doing events anyway. I've done so many events over the last 20 years. So this is going to be just a fun whole day event that is going to be amazing.
Okay. So reclaim2020event.com. And you also had said for our listeners that you actually had a special discount you wanted to offer.
Yes. So I've got a 40% discount for all the Ripplers. Yes. And hold on, I'm going to tell you what it is. I just have to remember. Hold on 1 second. And it is based on. I think it
was Ripple 2020, right?
It is, yes, Ripple 2020. I just wanted to make sure I got it right. So, for all of those who listen to Steve who are Ripplers, you can put in Ripple 2020 in the box and you will be able to get that 40% off. So it's a pretty great deal because of the pre-event program, which you can start today. And then you can leading up until the event itself and then the whole replay afterwards. So it's a pretty awesome opportunity.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's awesome. I know we're going to have a lot of listeners that are going to want to take advantage of that. I've got it up on the screen, but the event is called reclaim2020event.com, and then put in at checkout the code Ripple2020. And you'll get your 40%, which is ridiculously generous offer by Sonya to do that for us. So thank you for that. So as I want to wrap this up, but I can't let you go without hitting you up with a couple of Ripple questions, right? So one of the questions I want to ask you, because I'm really excited to see what your response would be, but you're so focused on empowering women. If there could be a message that's put on a billboard across the world, right, that could be anywhere, what message would you want to convey to women?
You are just enough as you are right now in this moment. You don't need to transform or be better or improve. You are perfect today. I think that is the one message. If every woman really took that on board, everything would change.
That is great. I love that. That's so good. What a great message. So if you weren't doing what you're doing now as a career path, because I think I led you last time and you're like, so I'm changing it up last time we talked.
Okay, good.
And so everybody knows I'm really big into ripple connection questions because you just learn so much about people. But so my question to you is, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, career-wise, what would you be doing?
It's so hard to imagine. I know, right? It's so hard to imagine anything else. But like, okay, so I think I would be an author. I would be a full-time speaker. Like, those are the kind of things that would be really exciting for me. Like, I've always wanted to be that, author that, holes away, in a cabin writing the book, like I could so see myself doing that. And I will write a book one day. It's in me. It's like my plan this year. But I would just love to do that full time. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I would too. I think it would be great. That should be our plan at some point. I mean, not that we ever want to fully retire from what we do, but I think, I've told my wife I would really like to take 6 months off every year to just do nothing but write, right? Whether it's new content for new programs, but more or less, I mean, I really want to write more books, both, in support of my original book, but also I'm really good at telling stories. And I really feel like I could be a potential fiction writer. So that's, I'm going to do that before I'm, all said and done. So we'll find that cabin and we'll write together. How about that?
I love it. Done.
So, another question I would have for you is, given that we're in the middle of this global pandemic and, things are so crazy on a lot of levels, what has this pandemic actually taught you about yourself?
Like, I've always known that I need a lot of space, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's always been an important piece of my life. But this pandemic, having started off with having a lot of space, it's a little bit different now that I'm navigating a few new things. But, I really realized how absolutely pivotal space is for me. Like, I need days every week where I am not engaged with people and I'm not having to do anything, right? Like, that's the kind of thing I really need. And then when I have that on the days that I am engaged, I'm so alive, I'm so vibrant, I'm so, present. And so that balance for me has really been awakened at how, like, absolutely key that is for me to be successful.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's, it's funny when you're confined with family in small space, you probably really, recognize the need for that. Right. And how powerful that is to you in terms of your work, but just recharging your mental vibrance that I think you need. I can relate to that. Absolutely. Well, my last question, and it's a loaded one, but what does the ripple effect really mean to you?
I think it's those connections and that ability, it's like these tiny seeds that are planted. And once they kind of like bloom or break, it's like they create this amazing ripple that touches so many lives, or even touches our own life, right? Like, comes back. I can always see those ripples that come back, right? We might create a ripple and it comes back to us full force. And I think it's kind of that idea of like this small thing, right? A small act of kindness is an example that creates such profound effects over time. And that's what ripples really do, is that, that ability to be able to just a tiny action, a tiny seed, a tiny connection that blossoms into something so profound and beautiful.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, I am so grateful for the ripple that we started together all those years ago. The fact that you have let me hang around and, kind of, travel in the same spheres that you travel, the same universe. You're an amazing, amazing person. I can't tell you how proud of you I am to see, I mean, when I first met you, I knew you were going to be big, but I mean, you have just absolutely blown up in every capacity and done such amazing things with your career path. But most importantly, you've followed your gut and you followed your heart. You're an inspiration to me and to lots and lots of people. And I highly recommend everybody check out Sonya's site, Sonya Stattmann, STATTMANN.com. Definitely check out what she's doing. She's put together some great programs. Tune into her podcast, The Women in the Business Arena. It's one of the best podcasts you're ever going to hear, and really will empower you and guide you in so many ways. Whether you're a man or you're a woman, I guarantee you that it's for everybody, because the lessons that both Sonya and Laura share, they're universal. And so thank you so much for being a part of this. I mean, I really am blessed by your friendship and your support and your willingness to continue rippling with me all these years.
I am so honored. Thank you, Steve, so much.
Thanks for being here. Well, thank you everyone for listening to the latest edition of the Ripple Effect podcast. As always, if you like this episode, please share it with somebody, ripple it out to somebody so that they can learn about what we're talking about on here, learn about Sonya and her great work. And we greatly appreciate you taking the time to listen. We know it's you got lots of podcasts that you can take a listen to, and we greatly appreciate the support and the feedback that you continue to give us time and time again. If there are topics or individuals that you think might be a good fit for a show in the future, please hit me up at steve@ripplecentral.com. And as always, follow us on Twitter @RippleOn. You can find me on Instagram @RippleOn, probably on Facebook under the same. I don't know. I'm there. You can look for me. But I really, really appreciate everyone. Have a fantastic day. Go out, do some good for someone, make somebody smile. Make a difference. The world needs it right now. We need a lot of ripplers out there going out and making a difference. So as always, you all take care and ripple on.